Hello YouTube. Russia has countless lakes. Large and small, normal and not so normal lakes. I'll tell you about few of them. And I'll start with the Lake Baikal. It's the world's oldest and deepest freshwater lake. It curves for nearly 400 miles to southeastern Siberia, north of the Mongolian border. More than 5,000 feet deep at its most profound, with another 4-mile thick layer of sediment further down. The lake's cold, oxygen-rich waters teem with bizarre life forms. I have described those mysterious humanoid beings and their unfortunate encounter with the Soviet military divers. I've done it for years and you can see it in the playlist. But today I'll talk about other strange phenomena associated with this sacred Lake Baikal, because in Russia many people consider it to be a sacred lake. Baikal is not just a miracle of nature, but also a historically sacred place for many peoples of Siberia and Altai. It is no wonder that there have been a lot of rumors and legends around this place. But the most interesting thing is that many of them turn out to be far from groundless. There is even a name for the anomalous area in Baikal where unusual things happen. It's called the Baikal Triangle. The numerous anomalous phenomena and incidents around Alkhon Island and Cape Riti generated interest for decades even before. But this doesn't mean that the strange events began to happen somewhat recently. These places have long been considered shamanic places of power, and therefore numerous evidence of unusual incidents were simply attributed to local legends. One of the first documented incidents in this area is described by the Soviet academician Georgy Galazi in the book Baikal in Questions and Answers. In 1907, a community of Russian imperial officers attempted to fly across the lake in a balloon. But as soon as the aircraft rose into the air, a real hurricane came up, also rose, although the ground was completely calm. The pilots could not navigate by compass, as the device literally went crazy. As a result, the balloon crashed on the coastal rocks, and most of the expedition members were killed. And the survivors told little about the disaster and flatly refused to repeat the flight. Of course, this incident was not the only one. Alexander Burmeister, himself a frequent participant in various Baikal expeditions, in his book Secrets of the Lake Baikal, tells about dozens of missing people, participants of research expeditions and amateur travelers. Every year, at least several vessels disappear in the area of Cape Riti, and in the years 2000 and 2005, 2 helicopters crashed in the anomalous zone. Witnesses said that the aircraft seemed to hit an invisible wall and lost control and fell into the water. In the early 2000s, an attempt was also made to fly over the anomalous zone in a balloon, and it was relatively successful. There were no fatalities. But the participants had to make a hard landing in the coastal forest. Over the territory of the Baikal Triangle, they encountered all the same problems: the failure of navigation equipment and radio communications, strong gusty winds of an uncertain direction. It should be noted that strong wind and electronics failure are not the only oddities observed in the anomalous zone. Numerous witnesses tell of a mysterious glowing balls, pillars of fire and mirage. It is believed that the unusually clean air over the strait between Alkhon Island and Cape Riti, which works like a giant lens, is to blame. It is formed due to the unusual windrows of Lake Baikal, which may also be the source of strange turbulence over the lake at high altitudes. There's more about this lake that I'll talk in the future, and I already described one of the strangest UFO incidents in the video that I made before, and it's in the playlist. And there is much about Lake Baikal that people outside of Russia should know, and inside Russia too. And it's a lake well deserved to be preserved. But now I want to talk about another strange incident in another place in Russia. And I'll start with the Rybinsk Reservoir. Informally called Rybinsk Sea, is a water reservoir on the Volga River and its tributaries Sheksna and Mologa. It's formed by Rybinsk hydroelectric station dam, located in the Tver, Vologda and Ryaroslav regions. To me, it's like the heart of European Russia. At the time of its construction, it was the largest man-made body of water on Earth. The territory of modern Vesiegonsk district was originally populated by the Ves people, a Finnish tribe. The name of Vesiegonsk derived from Ves. There are rumors that President Putin is from the Ves people too, by the way. So, Vesiegonsk and the Vesiegonsk Triangle, a small area in the northwestern part of the Rybinsk Sea, is somewhat similar to Bermuda Triangle in terms of the number of anomalous phenomena per square kilometers. Even before the flooding, due to the construction of the hydroelectric station, small so-called eared balls or spheres with ears, resembling peculiar periscopes, were observed on local lakes. In the later years, huge towers up to 5 meters were also noticed, on the surface of which devices similar to antennas were displayed. If the tower appears at night, it shows orange lights, which the helmsmen on ships sometimes mistake for the light on the buoys. The bulk of observations are accounted for by vessels bound for Vesiegonsk. Most often, their electromagnetic devices fail for a short time, but sometimes the watchmen, especially at night, see columns of greenish light coming from the thickness of dark waters. And those who have read my book, Russia's USO Secrets, will know the significance of the greenish light coming from the dark waters in oceans and seas. Daredevils who dare to swim closer to the area of the lights for a short time, they also lose their orientation in space. And in winter, devil's eyes appear in the ice, huge natural ice holes. After a few hours, they begin to freeze, forming a treacherous trap for fishermen. Obviously, there is a short-term release of hot water from the bottom. The mechanism of this phenomenon has not yet been found, and many local residents attributed it to aliens. This talk about aliens is generated by all sorts of emergencies that took place. For example, this is how Alexander Kozlov, the skipper of one of the barges in the sea, describes the disaster in which he got into. Suddenly, the bottom of the barge, having caught on something, grated. As I jumped on deck, I was horrified to see the port side begin to rise above the water. In a matter of seconds, the heavily loaded barge tilted so much that the water gushed over the starboard side, and I fell headlong from the deck. Surfacing, I saw that in the place where the ship had just been, surrounded by floating watermelons, a massive structure, 4 meters high, was slowly growing out of the water. What was that massive structure that appeared around the sinking or floating cargo of Kozlov's barge? It is noteworthy that the area of the Vesiegonsk Triangle began the whole history of the area began in the 1890s, when local residents noticed that something moving, wiggling, fell at the outskirts of one of the villages. It fell from the sky. Then it mysteriously disappeared under the ground. After a short time, the Vesiegon peasants discovered that an obscure influence, impact, or power was emanating from this place. In a strange way, cattle began to get sick. People being near the site experienced headaches, fatigue, seizures, and fainting. Soon these sites were considered to be cursed. The local authorities sent a priest who forbid the God-fearing villagers not only to approach these perilous sites, but even to talk about them. Alexander Petrovich Gusev, a native of one of the villages of the ill-fated triangle, told an amazing story that confirms the existing legends. Our village was big then, 100 or 120 households, and several hundred people lived there. What to say? Now in its place is an empty field. Already in the 1950s of the last century, the last inhabitants of the village left. Well, that's it. There's a lake near our village, and people saw something flying over that lake 100 years ago. And it flew over the lake and hit the shore on the outskirts of the village. My father told me that there was a hole 5 fathoms across, and in this pit on a hill, which from the ancient times was called Sarki. What it means I do not know. The place was bare, and nothing grew but a single young aspen tree, and the blow did not break it but only bent it, and it remained standing just on the rampart of this pit. Those who approached the pit said that there was slag scattered around. Where did it come from? Some of the pieces were black with holes, others greenish, dense and heavy. And in the pit itself, as the old man said, there were red-hot fire arrows, those that flew over the lake, and they moved. The animals were very afraid of this place, and then it became even worse. From the pit, the infection passed to the village. Animals began to get sick, and few people, they felt bad, especially those who went close to the pit. The local priest, seeing such a thing, ordered to bring either 10 or 12 carts of quicklime, which before was prepared for the repair of a stone church located quite far from us. The pit was filled up with a mixture of sand and lime, and then with earth, soil. It was said that the priest gave the peasants to kiss the cross and made them promise not to tell anyone about it and not to dig in the hole. There were actually 2 arrow pits. One of them was in the forest, about 800 meters from the village. I don't know what happened to that hole. This place, of course, was considered to be cursed. And to consecrate it, they put there a wooden chapel, very beautiful. Whether it helped or not, I don't know. But they say that there were cases when people suddenly became ill during the service, and the priest and the deacon could not serve for more than half an hour. They got confused or said something incoherent. And there was a path through these hills, Sarki, and you could go around the lake by it. Well, from that time on, people went there with caution, and they didn't let the children in at all. It would be a disaster if the children noticed. It was also said that 10 years after the fall of the arrows, one of the peasants built a hut in the village and put a piece of white metal under the corner of it, which he found in a pit. There was a popular local belief that stones from the sky brought happiness to the house, to the household. Well, they couldn't live in that house after that. Their heads were heavy. They had nightmares at night. But you had to go to the Sarki hills, whether you wanted to or not. The granaries were there, and they were put there because there were no mice on that hill. It was believed that if you stay on the hill for a short time, you would be fine. But otherwise, if you stayed longer, the disease could become attached to people. This is what I heard happened. By the way, on these hills, until the year 1938, daisies with black petals were found. But in the lake, it was different. It was 100 meters from the village to the lake, and people swam there and fished, and the women rinsed their clothes from the bridges. The women, of course, had their own place for swimming, a small bay surrounded by bushes, and it was located just opposite the hills. So after all these events, they noticed that after swimming in that bay, people seemed to get younger. The skin became elastic, clean, and fatigue disappeared. And if you were in the water for 5 minutes, no more, then even disease were cured. There were even cases, they say, that women were cured of infertility. About 10 years after the arrows fell from the sky, a big iron steamship, came down in flames, as the old people said, and dug a hole in the ground near the mountain that is not far from here, and went into that hole. Since then, we have noticed that the land and water in our and neighboring lakes sometimes begin to shake. This vibration began and ended at certain time and on certain days. The ships move. That's what the people said. Many fishermen said that at first all the water shakes violently. It feels good through the boat, and then the frequency of the vibration increases. There is a sound. This sound becomes higher and higher, and soon you can hear something like the sound of a mosquito flock. They also began to notice that if you do not leave the vibration zone in time, then the person becomes ill, as if he gets drunk, loses control of himself, does not understand what is going on. That's what happens to people. Then after a short time, after the descent of the steamship, they notice more and more strange little men of small stature, 130 to 150 centimeters, with earthy green faces. Alexander Petrovich Gusev was not the only local resident who talked about such visions. Of course, local UFO researchers from 1989 have organized several dozen expeditions to this anomalous zone. Something did turn up there. For example, they confirmed the information about the interference with the technical devices in the area of Agarkov. Researchers also observed strange objects on one of the lakes. And during the excavations, they found a lot of interesting things, including the remains of an ancient building, traces of steel making, and something that looks like a rocket nozzle. Ufologists also managed to find out that Hindus lived in these parts in the past. In honor of their god Krishna, one of the villages under Vesiegonsk was called Krishnevo. Later it was renamed Krasnovo. There used to be a village called Delhi. According to local residents, Hindus could fly to and from India in half an hour and could perform other miracles. They even taught the natives basics of yoga. Whether they were somehow connected with the little green man is unknown. It is possible that both of them were attracted here by some special energy, some amazing power. I need to bring your attention to the case I have described in my lectures, books. It's about the rocket that was found in Kiev twice, and it was excavated in late 1940s. And the rocket had inscriptions in Sanskrit. Very interesting case, but not for this video. Anyway, local ufologists put forward several versions of the events that took place near Rybinsk. Among them, invasion of aliens, fall of a meteorite, poisoning with gas or mercury vapor, which can, among other things, cause hallucinations. But why did everyone have the same visions? Steamships and little green men. Now let's talk about another lake, a very strange lake in Russia. It's a picturesque lake, Surzy, located in the amazing district of the Arkhangelsk region. The cleanest waters here are rich in valuable commercial fish, and the banks are surrounded by virgin mixed forest. But the local beauty and the prospect of rich production attract few fishermen and tourists. This reservoir has a terrible reputation as a cursed dead place where people have been dying under mysterious circumstances for well more than a decade. Unexplained incidents began here in the early 2000s with several deaths of vacationers. They began with the death of a fisherman named Vladimir Belugin, who went on a winter fishing trip with a group of friends. After perforating holes in the ice, the man noticed that the water's edge was covered with a strange oily film, and after fishing, everyone felt sharp indisposition. Vladimir Belugin quickly died. The man did not even have time to take him to the hospital. Forensic medical examination found it difficult to determine the cause of death. The official version was the death from poisoning by an unknown gas. This verdict alarmed the local municipality, and a team of researchers was sent to the lake. Tests have confirmed that there are toxic substances of unknown nature in the lake. To this day, it has not been possible to determine what kind of poison killed the fisherman or how the substance ended up in the waters of Surzy. Especially disturbing is the fact that whatever the nature of the toxic substance, it seems that it is spreading from the lake to the surrounding areas. For some reason, people did not want to believe the official conclusion of forensic experts who did not find traces of poisoning with ethyl or any other alcohol in the tissues of the deceased person. Well, he didn't die from drinking, that's what it means. In the vicinity of the lake, experts took samples of moss, lichens, wood, soil for examination, hoping to find at least some clue. But all the samples taken were environmentally friendly. In October 2001, scientists visited Surzy trying to find out what could have caused the death of this fisherman. Experts undertook to investigate the bottom sediments of the reservoir, and all changes that occur in the water air environment were recorded in the sediments, so to say. No anomalies were detected. And exactly a year later, in the autumn of 2002, a new tragedy occurred on Surzy, almost exactly repeating the previous one. And people who were in the boat felt unwell. They had pulling pains in legs and spine, shortness of breath, and chills. Well, local residents report that animals, birds, and even insects are less common in the surrounding forests and trees. The trees are gradually dying and drying up. In the villages surrounding Lake Surzy, livestock deaths have become more frequent, and people are also getting sick more often. Mysterious incidents on Lake Surzy and in its vicinity are causing more and more anxiety and questions, and several theories have been put forward on this basis to explain what is happening. There are two popular theories. One calls the cause of poisoning of the Surzy waters geographical location because of the proximity to the Vesiegonsk cosmodrome. Another, no less popular theory, put forward as a source of toxic substances some black holes, pits of unknown origin found on the bottom of the reservoir. Spontaneously formed in the depths of the lake, these holes emit toxic substances into the water. Be that as it may, today's science finds it difficult to explain the strange mortality of people and animals around Surzy, and fishing and recreation on its shores remain deadly. In 2001-2002, several people were poisoned by toxins on the lake, and some died. Well, suggestions that the poisoning could have been caused by toxic substances, petals, after the fall of one of the stages of rockets launched from the Vesiegonsk cosmodrome, were not confirmed. Experts of the Chershov Institute of Oceanology of the Russian Academy of Sciences conducted a survey of the lake with a remote-controlled deep-sea vehicle GNOME. They found at the bottom of the so-called pits that periodically emit gas into the water environment. This is something like microvolcanoes that periodically release gas into the water environment. The same holes were found in the northern and wide seas. Part of the lake was not explored as it was heavily overgrown. Water samples were taken in the lake Surzy to check toxicity studies, and the results were negative. The fishing paradise came there to the end in the fall of 2002. Since that time, the lake is officially closed to the public. And although there are no blockades along its banks, none of the residents of nearby villages will dare go there today, even for a good reward. Only participants of 3 expeditions came to Surzy: scientists, doctors, military personnel, employees of Ministry of Internal Affairs, and the FSB. I've described it before. It's like a modern version of KGB. And representatives of local authorities. Experts wanted to understand what kind of mysterious force is killing people on a distant lake. Today we can more or less confidently say that the Lake Surzy is one of the most studied water bodies on the territory of Russia. Experts came in from all sides trying to figure out, so what is this unknown substance that could have killed people? One thing is clear: people were poisoned by something. But with what? The most severe poisoning can be caused by high concentrations of heavy metals, lead, mercury, cadmium, as well as chlorine or fluorine. Representatives of Sanitary and Epidemiological Service, the Hydrometeorological Service, and the Regional Committee on Ecology gave a unanimous conclusion. In this regard, there is nothing unusual in the lake's water, except for a slightly increased content of manganese, iron, and zinc. And the first time we studied the water in the laboratory, they said, the experts grumbled. What did you bring us? This is the standard of pure water. You can drink from this lake. People say that the water in the lake is not quite typical for northern Russian reservoirs. So clean, even with a blue tinge. Nevertheless, the lake fish were checked for radiation and nothing was detected. You could even see it with the visible naked eye. There are still a lot of fish in the lake. It is well fed, which indicates a good food base, and the fish does not appear to be weak. The water has quite healthy algae. There are crustaceans. Swans bask on the surface of the lake. The surrounding area is full of game. Capercaillie, grouse, ducks. There are countless bears in the area, and reindeer and elk are walking around. I did mention some of the trees, so this is very interesting. The trees are dying in certain areas, and in the others around the lake, nature is flourishing. Experts took fragments of moss lichens to study, hoping to find at least some clue. But all the samples taken were environmentally friendly. Pathogens of infectious diseases were also not found. One study discovered that the lake had a 10-fold increase in fluoride content. Scientists believe that man has nothing to do with it. This is a natural phenomenon. Maybe there are some other natural deviations. For example, the source of toxic fumes at the bottom. But for example, in the destructive African lakes, where emissions of sulfur and carbon dioxide led to mass death of people, and the water was dirty and muddy. And Surzy, Lake Surzy, is as transparent as a tear. There were attempts to check the most unexpected versions of the cause for the death of the people. Someone suggested that the area of the lake is located on a fault in the Earth's crust and is a geopathogenic zone. But in this case, there must be at least some chemical changes. but there are no changes. If this is a natural anomaly which has no analogues in the world, then why do only people, human beings, die in the lake, and animals and plants live basically as nothing has happened? The head of the Regional Geological Service recalled that there were cases of natural gas emissions in the Arkhangelsk region, but it was always methane, which is characterized by a sharp smell. The victims would have told scientists about it, but they didn't feel anything out of the ordinary. Lake Surzy is located near the Vesiegonsk Cosmodrome. Immediately after the tragedies with the fishermen, people started talking about the fact that in the Mezin district, where the lake is located, spent rocket stages regularly fall out from the sky. And even though the areas for falling rocket parts are clearly regulated in Russia and the lake does not belong to them, there may have been failures in the operations of equipment. This means that the fishermen could have been poisoned by the main component of rocket fuel, heptal, but repeated tests of water were made by military laboratories. No traces of rocket fuel were found. In addition, rocket fuel, even if toxic, cannot cause instant death. And rocket fuel cannot cause a sharp deterioration in health and almost instant death in a human, unless you pour it on yourself. That's the conclusion of experts from the Arkhangelsk department of the FSB, who did not find traces of heptal in the samples taken from the lake Surzy. Head of the Regional Department of Health was also officially stated that there is no reliable data on the presence of toxic components of rocket fuel. There are too many rumors surrounding this story. Hunters allegedly saw on the bank of the large river, which flows into the lake, a certain object that looks like a stage from a rocket, but the expeditions that examined the lake found nothing. They say that in the late 1980s, in the area of the lake, helicopters were constantly flying around. What they were looking for, no one knows. Attention was drawn to the fact that the event on the lake occurred in the fall, when the water levels rose. Therefore, it is not excluded temporary flooding of some poisonous object, which poisoned Surzy. But first of all, it was not found. Second, there must have been some impurities left in the water samples. It would have been discovered, but there are none. However, residents of these areas have long noted that very strange things happen here. Mushroom berries now are less common in the area, and even animals try to avoid the places around the lake, right around the lake. In the nearby villages, people are getting sick more often, and cattle are actively dying. The residents of the Mezin district, where the mysterious lake is located, ask not to hush up what is happening and expect to continue investigation. Those who are not indifferent to the mystery of the Lake Surzy put forward their own versions of the mysterious death. So it's a very complicated picture, as you can see. What is going on around the lake? In 2005, as the Moscow Institute conducted research in the lake Surzy, again, no remnants of rocket fuel were found, which according to one version could have fallen into the lake from launching rockets from the Vesiegonsk Cosmodrome. Water tests for radionuclides also rejected the cause of death from radon. The main result of the expedition was the conclusion that the rocket stages could not have caused the tragedy, as well as the components of the rocket fuel. According to the result of samples taken from the lake, experts concluded that they were non-toxic. At that time, the conclusion of the experts was not made public, but one thing became clear. There are poisons in the lake. It is not clear how the toxic substances got into the waters of this lake and could not affect its appearance. Surzy remains a picturesque place that attracts people to rest on its shores. Only not that many people want to do it. Now, geologists debunk the assumption about the presence of the geopathogenic zones. although they themselves could only cause a deterioration of health, those zones, but not poisoning. Of course, the question comes, are we dealing with a UFO? It is known that in the northern latitudes in Russia, there are places where they are most often encountered, and of course I have examples in my book, and as always I say, mostly it's military tests, but not all. There's a certain percentage you can never explain. So, was the poisoning of fishermen caused by the impact of alien life? Alien life support products or emissions from their craft. It is also possible to try to influence the body of fishermen to scare them away as uninvited witnesses to the appearance of UFOs on this faraway lake. Well, questions remain. And there are other lakes that I will speak about. Russia is a big country. It has many lakes. I'll bring you more fascinating reports from Russia and its paranormal phenomena, from Ukraine, Central Asia, and from China. I ask that you please support my research. There are links in the description on how you can do it. And thank you for your attention. Be safe.